The story is of a 15-year-old who's lying about her age. She's dating an older man. Why did you want to dive into writing a book about that type of thing?
She was inspired by this amazing girl that I saw on a bus. I sort of thought if she wasn't in a school uniform, if she was dressed in a business suit with a briefcase, or, she would be unstoppable. And that's how
Wow.
the story started. And who would be able to tell that she was only 15?
Right, right. Oh, wow. Catherine Evans, welcome to the Bookaholic Podcast.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, glad to have you here. Before we get started with talking about your book, which is called All Grown Up, let's dive into a little bit about why you wanted to become an author.
Well, I've always been a writer, always.
Oh.
And I worked in the city for years, and that's in investment. And I suddenly sort of thought in my 30s, if I don't get on with writing a book, I never, ever would do it. So I really started taking it seriously. And my first book was released in 2018 with Unbound.
Yes.
And that's about a dysfunctional northern family. And that took me 11 years, actually, from start to finish. So
Wow.
Yeah, there were a lot of things going on in my life. I had a big job. I got married. I had a baby. I did a master's degree at Kingston. So, it wasn't just all about the book. And my next book only took me 5 years. So I cut the time down by more than half.
You cut the time down. And so I bet your next book will only take a year.
A month or two at the most.
Exactly. Well, let's now dive into All Grown Up. The story is of a 15-year-old who's lying about her age, and this causes consequences because she's dating an older man. So she's underage, dating a complete man who's also married. Why did you want to dive into writing a book about that type of thing?
Well, I didn't originally start that way. The way that I normally write books is usually with a very strong central character, and I kind of see where that character takes me. And in this case, my main character, who's called Neveah, she's a 15-year-old girl. She was inspired by this amazing girl that I saw on a bus. I'll never see that girl again. I don't know, but she inspired the whole story. She was with a bunch of her friends. When school kids are all together and they're noisy and they're kind of annoying.
Yeah.
And, I was trying to read my book, and then I noticed there was one child in that group who was very poised, very mature looking, and she put everybody in their place. And she was very striking looking as well. And she inspired my character. I found myself thinking about that girl long after the bus journey was over. And I started the whole story around her. And I sort of thought if she wasn't in a school uniform, if she was dressed in a business suit with a briefcase, or, she would be unstoppable. And that's how the story started. And who would be able to tell that she was only 15?
Right. Oh, wow. What an interesting beginning to a story. But, to creatives, and I consider myself a creative as well, anything can inspire you.
Yeah, it's funny. But my first book was inspired by a voice, by an accent. Like I really, like this accent. And I actually set my book in a region of the UK that I didn't even know particularly well, just because I really liked the accent.
Wow.
I love your accent, by the way, Deirdre. It is lovely.
I have that Southern accent, I guess. So that's what you're hearing.
We love it here. So
really? Well, the British accent for me, when I hear a male from Great Britain speak, that just does it for me.
Don't you automatically assume that he's a baddie, though?
Now, what did you say? What did
Don't
you say?
don't you automatically assume that he's a baddie? Because all the
Yeah.
villains in all the movies, especially Bond movies, where they all have British accents.
Yes, yes, it's just the whole thing, and by the way, I love James Bond, so
Oh, yeah.
it's the whole thing with me, it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, now, so do you consider Neveah, she is your central character, but then she has a friend also in
Mhm.
this book.
Yeah. Yeah, she does. She
So
has a friend that she confides in. It's very difficult, especially being the age I am, writing from a teenage perspective. But actually, only in terms of the vernacular and the language, and because you have to be very careful that it doesn't date in the future. You could use
right.
all this slang now, but you have to really be mindful that it doesn't date because slang dates so quickly. And so
Yes.
getting that natural sounding conversations is very important, but you have to really keep an eye on what it's going to sound like in like 10 years' time, you know?
Correct,
So,
correct. And I was going to ask you that question that you are writing about young people
mm,
and how you came to even want to do that part too, because that could be daunting. As you said, one daunting part is the slang. And, unless you would have said, for an example, this book is going to take place in the 1990s, and you use the slang from that era, and then that wouldn't have dated it, but this is like
yeah,
contemporary, up to date.
exactly. And actually, one of the other things that I started thinking about was my own teenage years. And,
Hmm.
one of the themes in this book is the early sexualization of young girls, which I think it was a problem when I was growing up, and it's still a problem now. And I think it's always
Yes,
been a problem. And
yes,
I think there's a lot of dishonesty around it. I think a lot of people assume that the girls are just passive victims, just waiting for, a groomer or whatever. It's not like that. The girls, and certainly when I was a teenager, I had a lot of agency and I believed I had way more power than I actually did. And I
mm,
wanted to test that power. And I put myself into situations that I would be horrified of my own daughter, you know, and I was very lucky that I emerged from it relatively unscathed. It wouldn't have taken much for, probably the whole course of my life to change. Because young
right,
people, they take an awful lot of risks. They are not very risk aware, girls and boys, and they put themselves into positions that they believe they can easily get out of.
right, right,
So
right. Such as maybe you're talking about a young girl, maybe testing, going into a bar,
exactly.
flirting with an older man, and
And you
that's
think you're just flirting and you sort of test, how it goes. And obviously you think you're looking much older than you are, but it's usually little things that actually give you away. And sometimes I'm pretty sure the men are deliberately blind to cues like that, because men, generally speaking, see what they want to see. And
hmm.
I think this whole book was about, I didn't want to take sides. I didn't want to moralize. I just wanted to present a story that was honest and, where each character has, we all believe that we're the stars of our own show. And
Yeah,
and it's really easy to forget that,
yeah,
even I'm sure even, Jeffrey Dahmer believed he was the star of his own show.
sure.
So, and we all see the world from a very skewed perspective. And so it was important to me to give all the points of view and let the readers make up their own minds.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, let's talk about also the male toxicity, what goes on without giving the story away with her friend,
Yeah.
Billy.
You mean
Billy,
Billy?
Billy, Billy. Yes. So men are usually challenged with, or young men are usually challenged with having to prove that they're brave in some sort of type of way. Is this the case of Billy?
Yes, definitely. And also boys not only have to, young boys particularly, I think the world is very, very difficult for young boys, especially at the moment, because
Hmm.
they've always had this macho side that they have to show to the world. They have to present one thing to the world, even though they might be completely different inside, and they have to impress their friends. They can't ever lose face. It's,
Right.
and I really feel that now, don't get me wrong, I think girls can be just as ghastly to other girls as
Oh,
boys
yes.
can. In fact, Margaret Atwood writes very beautifully about that in, her book, Is It Cat's Eye, I think it is, about
Mm,
the bullying amongst young girls, which is so subtle sometimes that the outside world doesn't see it. I think for boys, it's much more overt, and boys are generally very aggressive with each other. They have all these hormones raging. And so don't think I don't sympathize. I really do. I wouldn't be a teenage boy if you paid me
right.
gazillions, I think it's very easy for boys to overstep the mark and to make potentially very damaging mistakes, which not only ruin the course of their lives, but also the girls that they're interacting with. And, I just wanted to show a situation where a mistake like that could easily happen. And
Yes,
um,
most definitely. Your first book, The Wrong 'Un, how does it compare to your second book, All Grown Up? Is there a correlation of a theme that you're writing? What are your usual themes, and what do you think you're gonna go from there?
the two books are completely different. The one is
Ah,
about a dysfunctional northern family whose eldest son, who is adopted, sets about destroying the lives of all of his siblings, and his
oh,
parents I know it's pretty dark. I mean, I suppose my themes are quite dark, but I do try and have a light touch. I like to have a bit of humor in there. I like to, because Caravaggio's paintings, the darkness is very much highlighted by the chiaroscuro and the light. Um,
yes, yes.
I think if you wanted to ask me what my overriding commonality is, I think it's dysfunctional families, um,
Okay,
and
yes.
how things go wrong, usually in the home, relationships and the power dynamics in relationships and how those change over time. That's also
Mhm.
something I'm really interested in. I explore a lot in my books. It-
Yes, yes. So with your books, even though they may have a dysfunctionality and maybe a dark theme to them, is there a redemptive type of ending, or is it open and
There is redemption. I don't like to provide all of the answers. I do always like to leave something for the readers to think about.
right?
But I do think there is potential for redemption, certainly in the wrong one. Um,
Mhm, mhm.
at the end of the book, without giving any spoilers, I would like the reader to really think, hang on, who was the wrong in there?
Yeah,
Who really was the person who was most at fault there?
right,
And,
right, right, right.
and I do think there is potential for redemption.
Got
Definitely.
you, got you. Well, now you still currently have you're the non-executive director. What does that mean?
It means I'm on the board, but I'm not an executive. I don't take decisions. I'm just there you're talking about Phoenix Copper. It's a
Yes.
It's a British mining company which is but the mine is in Idaho. So I've actually spent a lot of time in Idaho. It's a beautiful place. I love it. I do still have a day job. That's really what you're talking about.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes.
even if I became world famous and sold every single, had a book in every bookshop in the world, I would probably still keep my day job. First of all, because I think it's really interesting. And the people I work with are great. So I
Wow.
I also think having a life outside of writing gives me a lot to write about.
True, true. I mean, that keeps the inspiration,
Yeah.
unless you choose to have, like some authors have a certain character that they carry throughout various books. Alex Cross, for example, like for James Patterson, unless you have one of those type of characters. I'm not saying that you still wouldn't need outside inspiration, but they have already built that world around that character,
I've
so that's
actually
just the whole thing.
I really admire writers who can do that. All of my books are also, I mean, I've only written two, but the ones I'm thinking about as well, and the ones I'm working on, they have nothing in common with each other in terms of the world as of, I suppose they're all rooted in reality. I don't write sci-fi or fantasy or anything like that.
Right.
I would love to write a historic novel set in a mine in Idaho because
Oh, wow.
the whole community that we operate in is so interesting. There's some wonderful characters, and there are
Yes.
third, fourth generation miners, and
Oh,
it's a very proud industry. The people who are very proud to. I remember when I was little, loving that song "Coal Miner's Daughter," and so
oh,
I never knew I'd be involved in mining myself.
I know, really. Gosh, wow. Yeah. So, yeah, Loretta Lynn's famous song, Coal Miner's Daughter, right?
Exactly.
Very much so. Wow.
I have a
Yeah.
better voice
So,
for you now.
well, now, where is your writing taking you next? You do have, I'm sure, another novel playing around in your head.
I have two actually.
Ooh,
So one is it's actually I'm novelizing, if that's even a word,
yeah.
a play that I wrote about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm turning that into a novel. And it's basically about a very disparate group of characters. The only thing they have in common is the fact they attend the same yoga class. And so the book sort of starts with the yoga class, and then it follows various, people in the class to their own lives. And then it ends
Yes.
back in the yoga class. Uh,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I like that idea of, people who have nothing in common coming together for whatever reason and then forming connections with each other, which could be across, any sort of, age, experience, class, race, the whole lot. They
Right.
have something in common, no matter how tenuous, and they can build links from that.
Yes, 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 yes. I often wonder, just my mind goes to like what you're just saying. You're in a class with different people, say at a gym, yours is the yoga class, or even like having dinner at a restaurant. You're there, let's just say for a 2 hour span, and you got different people there, and that's what we share in common at that moment. But then once we all leave, where do we
Exactly.
all go? What do we all do?
And
You
don't
know?
you find yourself wondering about people? Like, oh,
Hmm.
that guy with the beard on table 2, whatever it is, he looks
Yes,
kind of interesting. And I wonder I don't like the way he's speaking to her. What is the
right,
relationship there? It's really
right.
interesting. And I suppose I'm just really nosy. I'm a very nosy person, which
When
is
all is said and done, it's nosiness.
total nosiness, total inability to mind my own business, and I ask questions all the time. And so my publishing partner, because I've set up a publishing company as well, he
Oh.
is constantly, whenever we talk about, and I ask him questions, he goes, "Kathy, you're so nosy. Only you would ask this question." It's like, okay, sorry. And then I'll ask it again from another angle.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's the gift you have, nosiness, because if you didn't have nosiness, we wouldn't have some of your books to to
Well,
be an inspiration. You were a little nosy about the kids on the train,
oh my
and
word.
then you start thinking, so hey, your nosiness leads to books.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true.
Well, tell me, why did you want to do your own publishing company?
Well, because I had a publishing deal for All Grown Up, and
Hmm.
the publisher, after we almost got to, publication, they sent the book to a sensitivity reader, and
Yes,
and I can understand in many ways why that would be necessary, because my book
yes,
does deal with some very difficult themes.
yes.
But the sensitivity reader wanted to edit away everything I thought was topical and controversial about the book. And I didn't want to be controversial for the sake of it. They wanted
Right,
to water the book down so much that it wouldn't have been my book anymore.
right,
So
right,
I
right.
thought, I'm just going to do it myself. And so my publishing partner, as opposed to my husband,
Yeah.
I get bossed around equally by both of them. Let me just tell you, okay? So my publishing partner, Jurcell Virginia, he and I have been working on a book on his memoir, actually, which is based on his life story. He grew up in Curacao and now he lives in Holland. And his whole life was changed by practicing martial arts. And
Wow.
so we've written this book together. And when I told him that I'm setting up my own publishing company, he said, I'm in. I definitely want to join you here. So I was like,
Wow.
um,
And so you guys are looking into other writers.
we've already published 2 other writers. One
Oh,
is Annie David, who has written a very compelling book about Jonestown. It's called Paradise Undone, a novel of Jonestown. I'm sure some people aren't old enough to remember that horrific story, but she very sensitively looked to the people behind Jim Jones, the people who had these really high ideals and noble intentions of setting up this rainbow community in Guyana, and how it all just went horribly wrong because of like one man's terrible megalomania. And
one man.
I think she's done a great job of showing that the people behind Jim Jones were not brain dead zombies. They were not, idiots who drank the Kool-Aid. Actually, it was Flavor Aid. It wasn't even Kool-Aid. But,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
and she uses real and composite characters to tell a fictionalized story, which is essentially true.
Yes, yes. I think I was a teenager when that happened, I think. And, that was a horrific story.
Awful. And so many people don't understand the story. They just think, oh, a bunch of crazies went to Guyana and
I
committed
thought
suicide.
so. I
And that's,
thought so.
yeah. And
Mhm.
actually, there's a hell of a lot more to the story than that. So, and
Wow.
there's still people who are living living with the aftermath now, people
Oh,
who lost family, who lost relatives, and it's just dismissed as like, oh,
right.
bunch of crazy cult members who, you know, and Annie has done a wonderful job of telling that story. And
Yes,
then
yes.
I've actually got the rights back to my first book. When I set up a publishing firm, I better get my rights back. So I did.
Correct. Good for you.
I've got The Wrong and All Grown Up. We've got Paradise Undone. And we've also, in fact, it's on my desk here, we've published Fireweed, which is it's basically set in Hamburg in 1947 about
Hmm.
a young British military lawyer who falls in love with a German girl during a time of very strict anti-fraternization. So
Mm.
the Brits were not even allowed to chuck a crust at a starving German child in the street. It was so silly.
Oh my.
Yeah. And Hamburg and in fact, a lot of the German cities were devastated by the Allied bombings, not only the British, but the American as well. And,
Hmm.
the fireweed is a metaphor for regeneration, after destruction. And the book really, it examines, it's again very easy to dismiss the German people for, their collusion with Hitler. One of the questions the book asks is, what would you have done if you were in the same position?
Right, 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 right. Yes, yes. I can see that point of view as well. Well,
I mean,
wow.
important questions, but ultimately it's an adventure and it's a love story, but it has some depth to it. It's a really
Yeah.
read basically. So
Wow, wow, wow. Well, I certainly am extending an offer for any future interviews from some of your authors through your publishing company. You can just simply
amazing.
send me an email and we'll see maybe what we can do with some of those books and getting the word out about them.
Well, you can probably start with Annie because she is based in Colorado. So
Oh, wow. Wow,
just
wow, wow.
a hop, skip, and a jump away from you.
Yeah, exactly. But not, but not.
Yeah, UK.
But not. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. And we will have your contact information, book information, publishing company information in the podcast show notes and in the YouTube description box below. Catherine, once again, thank you for joining me today.
It's been so much fun. Thank you, Deirdre. Thank you so much.
Thank you.